What's up, trade pros? What's up, everyone? This is going to be an uncut video of how we broke down a potential Apple flyer and Google and whatnot and Amazon here today in the options room that we had at TRADEPRO Academy. So I'm going to break down exactly what we saw, how we caught the catch-up play with Apple, how we had some runners on Amazon and Google, and why we chose to look at those main ones from yesterday based on order flow. So we saw a lot of order flow and market structure set up on Google mainly, Amazon as well. But Google and Apple had really good setups based on the chart itself. So if we go to Google and I look at the daily here. Now what was interesting to me on the daily, before we get into the order flow, was, yeah, okay, this line is my day trade line. But if I go here into the daily and I break down this little area, and like this, let's call it, right? This like little pennant formation. Now, what's interesting here is that yesterday we went from pretty red until pretty green on Google, and we closed at about, or sorry, we hit the high at about the same area as the day before that. Now, these areas make for a very good breakout to the upside, right? When you get a push down and a rally into the end of the day, you get a very, very good potential for the turnaround for the break higher. Now, what we had noticed with this was, let me just break this down for you guys. We had some calls that came in on Google that were really, really aggressive into the end of the day. Now I'm trying to find them where I put them, but in the evening we mentioned in a trading room that I'm looking for these 3,000 calls for November 29th. So on Friday, I'm looking for these 3,000 calls, and I'm waiting to see if we can get the breakout through these tops. Now, the flow was very, very heavy to the upside. So if I go here, I'm using unusual whales for this, and I found a lot of good flow that came in even yesterday. Now, if I just type in Google here, we can see that they were loading up very heavily on these 3,000 calls. You can see they're the most hit here. They're the most attractive on the unusual whales flow side. Now, if I go into the historical flow, let's load this. What we can see is a pretty decent jump in bullish premium from the day before to yesterday, right? And today is pretty bullish as well. So that was very interesting. And also the fact that they were hitting those 3,000 calls like I just showed you guys. So there was a lot of just bullets being fired for 3,000 calls, and the breakout looked amazing. Now, with that being said, we wanted to wait for this breakout to really happen. So I got in a little earlier. I was mentioning to the room, you know what, I'm buying these 3,000 calls for about 430, 420 a contract here to see if we can get the next rally up, right? I didn't pick up this whole move, but we got a nice spike here. Now, this was one of the leading plays. This is something that we expected, right? Amazon too. Amazon, you look at this on the daily, and you're looking at this, and you say, okay, well, very nice potential breakout if we break 3,605, and there was a lot of calls. Now, I'm going to talk to you guys about how these two played into the potential break of Apple, because Apple was looking very slow, very sleepy throughout the day. And I'm going to talk about how the whales played into Apple and how the order flow played into Apple. So Google and Amazon, right? I'm not saying they were easy things to catch, but they were a little more well seen because they kind of just ripped. Now, Apple, what I really liked about Apple is we shaped up a very nice pennant throughout the day. And I'm thinking, well, if Google and Amazon rip so aggressively and the Qs are flying, then what's going on with Apple? And I was thinking this only because if I went to the whales here, right, and I looked at this hot chains and ticker, and even yesterday, what I saw was 160, 155, 157.50 calls on Apple just getting hammered, right? They're buying these like crazy. And I'm like, okay, well, why are they buying all these Apple calls that expire in a day? Well, I didn't know if they were buying, but why are they getting into all these Apple calls that expire in a day if this thing's not really moving anywhere, right? This thing is just pinned, and they kept on buying, right? They kept on buying throughout the day. Now, if I go into the actual flow itself, right, my live flow, and I just press Apple here and I make sure the filters are good. You can even go 100K, 1, 2, 3, and I go ask only, and I'll go, well, it doesn't really matter if they were OTM, but it did at that time. So let's go Apple. So we can see that, can I change the time because I want to see more? Let's see. I'm gonna have to go through all these, aren't I? Let's see, OTM. So just before this break, right? Just before the break, we can go into the chart and you can see, okay, the bullish flow is overwhelming a little, just by a little, but you can see just before this break happened, right? Because the break happened at around 11:30. But even before that, they were loading in on the call side a little heavier, right? So let's see. I don't know why these aren't by descending order, but they're loading on the call side pretty heavily. And the main thing that I saw was on Apple, we can see that they were loading very heavily on the actual 155, 157, 50, and 160 calls. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, well, if this is pinned and we just saw Amazon and Google just explode, I'm going to be looking to buy some of these calls. Right, I'm gonna be looking to buy some of the calls, and we mentioned this in the Discord. And I was in on these like even before the breakout had actually happened, because we mentioned this in a live trading room. And I'm thinking, okay, well, there's huge wicks, right? I'm thinking of next week's, right? I had some of this week's already from the room, 157.50s and the 155s. Now, what we're seeing is we picked them up around at $71 a contract, and they went above. Right, they went above $3 a contract on these, all mentioned here in the room. Now, in the live trading room, we did the same thing, but it was just all of that flow on the whales that was coming in, right? All the flow on the whales that was coming in, and the fact that you saw Amazon and Google rip. And I'm like, okay, there could be something here. The whole market's ripping. It's just that Apple isn't ripping. And they ripped on the news, right? There was news about the Apple car. And that always goes to show that look at the flow, play the levels, always follow the flow, because the whales know something that you don't, right? The whales are going to play this much better than we will, and they're going to find that big opportunity like we saw today, right? This huge pennant was amazing. Very similar to the shot play as well. Very nice shot pennant here. Amazon's ripping, all the tech is ripping, and that's exactly what we waited for. 1,700 calls this week, ripped for over 130, 150% on this. So a few follow-through plays. Now, why I wanted to make this video is you want to watch the flow and see what contracts are getting hit, right? You want to see what contracts are getting hit here. I'm using unusual whales, but you want to see which contracts are getting hit and how heavily, right? If the volume's crazy compared to the OI, this is great. That was the case yesterday for Google. Now, I don't know how to go back in time here, but it was the case for Google yesterday when they were just getting hit time and time again. And I think I even mentioned it on Twitter here. Why don't I scroll through? Give me 2 seconds. Let's see if we can find it. So, yeah. So I'm saying that Google right here, if you guys want to follow me on Twitter, Torio Trades. But Google, we're seeing the November 19th and November 26th hit like crazy, right? This is what I was looking at. So they're hitting them like crazy. The 3,000s for today, right? 295s for today, and also they're hitting 3,000s for next week, and just over 3,000 for next week. And this is what I posted up, right? So this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the break, right? And I want to see the break through a clean close above the 2,978. So I mentioned that in the live trading room, and we traded it live in our Zoom in the morning. And that's exactly what I saw with Apple. So Apple, same thing, but it wasn't really going anywhere. So you know that they're coiling out for the break. So if you guys enjoyed this video, it was a quick, just raw, uncut. I wanted to get it out so you guys understand the correlation between the FANG, right? Because the big FANG names, right, if they're going to go, I'm expecting to see some kind of movement, right? I'm expecting to see some kind of fall through. Look at Amazon. Microsoft could have played Microsoft on that. Google and Amazon carrying the whole team on their back, right? And these pennants, I'm just waiting for the break so we can play these areas. So Apple, Microsoft, very good catch-up plays, and so is Shop. Now, if you understand how these correlations work and understand how the flow works, and you want to learn more about the flow, just drop comments down below and